my entire look Goonpocalypse. What's good, G? All good. Red Paracetamol, welcome, man. Haven't seen you in a while. Look at this. Femboys Explain, Goonpocalypse, VTubers, the Yandere. What have you guys done to my algorithm? It's completely destroyed. Oh no. Oh no 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 no. Been a year since your first stream? Yeah. Hold up, actually, Asunder Cobra changed the title to my 1 year anniversary stream last week, Thursday. But it's been almost a week since last week, Thursday, and he didn't change it back. So, blame Asunder Cobra. Anyways, boys, let's see, what's the next one? Now we're gonna go back into real manly stuff. The history of Zuid-Afrika.
Sawubona wamgiligili unjani ngami lami ngu History with Hilbert. Now, why have I just introduced this video in Zulu? Well, as you can see, today I'm going to be talking about South African history.
Currency $22
Why am I
man,
talking
yes.
about South African history? Well,
Because it's based and South African pilled.
well, you can thank my good friend Griff over at Armchair Historian for this, who slid into my Twitter DMs the other day and asked, do you fancy doing a collaboration? Because me and the boys over at Armchair History are doing a video about the Zulu War, and I wanted to know why on earth a country down there is being invaded by a country up there. And I said, of course, I would like nothing more than to make a video explaining the context and the prelude to the Zulu Wars. Of course, this is a collaboration, and you should definitely check out Armchair Historian's channel, which I will link in the top below, as well as the top below, that doesn't work, in the little card on top, and also in the
Literally says, yeah. Interesting.
description below. You can find his channel where you can watch his
Sweet.
video about
I'll
the
peep it in my
Zulu
free time,
Wars. He makes
definitely.
animated videos, really cool. Definitely go and do that. But if you want to find out about why the war started, what was the context of obviously having Europeans in Africa and the whole Zulu kind of conundrum, then keep watching this video, which is about the context of the war going on in South Africa. So to begin with, we need to look at the first people to enter South Africa, and these people were the Khoisan. And the Khoisan, they emigrated to...
If you guys ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, excellent movie. I'm pretty sure that's the one that has the Khoisan featured in. Now, I don't know if those actors were Khoisan, but I think, you know, in regards to the movie timeline, that's what they're representing.
to sort of South Africa. They were found in the Cape around the year 0, but in the north of South Africa, they'd been there for a few hundred years longer.
Yes.
And these can be broken down into two different groups.
I missed it.
Sort of South Africa. They were found in the Cape around the year 0, but in the north of South Africa, they'd been there for a few hundred years longer. And these can be broken down into two different groups called the Khoikhoi, and the Khoikhoi, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation.
No, you got it right.
They were essentially the same group, but their occupation was to look after cattle. They were herdsmen, pastoral herdsmen, whereas the San were hunter-gatherer types, and these together are known as the Khoi San, but they were the same ethnic and linguistic group. Now, one of the huge shifts in African history, starting around the 3rd millennium BC, is the Bantu expansion from the kind of Congo region and then further south. And they actually were discovered in South Africa around 300 to 500 years after the Khoisan people reached there themselves. And it's thought that they would have displaced large...
Why do they call you Bantu when you have zero banter? Excellent joke. S-tier joke right there.
Large numbers of the Khoisan peoples, although there was some integration because in some of the southern Bantu languages like Zulu and Xhosa indicate
It's Xhosa, but anyways, nice try. Appreciate it.
having contact because of the clicking sounds, which were actually native to the Khoisan languages in the region. Now, of course, it was almost a millennium later that the first Europeans show up, and the first Europeans to see South Africa that we are aware of were the Portuguese, who had various colonies in the Indies and in India at the time. And actually part of South Africa along the coast of...
Yeah, I think they got here in, 15 or 1600s. Still like a long time ago.
Along the eastern side of the country is called Natal. And Natal, or Natalia, as it's sometimes called, is actually the Portuguese word for Christmas. And this was named by
I actually had no idea. Natalia is Portuguese for Christmas? That's interesting.
da Gama, who was of course a very famous Portuguese navigator. However, of course, the famous ones for South Africa for quite a while were the Dutch.
Yes, yes. The Dutch.
And the Dutch
Hold on. Are those unclaimed spices? Shame if somebody monopolized them. Ha! Ah, yes, the Dutch would have been such a force to be reckoned with in the Dune series. They would have wanted that spice.
1652 under Jan van Riebeeck founded Cape Town, or Kaapstad, just about a few miles north of Table Bay in the very south of South Africa. And of course, the Dutch then used this as a way station for various ships, which they sent to the East Indies and to various Dutch colonies in the area. And because the Khoisan peoples weren't really...
Verkoopt je ook stroopwafels? Okay, this is Dutch, so I don't even know what he said.
...that advanced in the way of farming and agriculture to support such a trade.
I think he's asking, do you also buy whatever stroopwafels is?
The Dutch had to import their own farmers, and of course these guys would later go on to be called the Boers.
Yep, that's me, chat. Well, not quite me, that's like half of me. No, half of my people, technically speaking, because I'm from the German line, not the Dutch line.
Which of course in Dutch means farmer. And these farmers then had some issues with the local VOC authorities. There was tension between them.
Bestaat hier een stroopwafelbelasting, jongens. Ons zal niet betalen.
Essentially because they had to pay tax and the Boers were starting to...
Oh, okay. So this is asking about taxes and they're like, they don't want to pay? Okay.
Trying to expand into the interior, whereas the VOCs, which is the Dutch East India Company, wanted them to stay around the Table Bay more than that. But of course this situation would only last throughout the 17th and much of the 18th century, because at this time the French in Europe were kicking up a fuss. And after a failed revolution in 1787...
Yeah, do you know what's interesting, Chad? I know someone who knew someone who was around when Napoleon was around. And that is wild to think about. So, there is someone that I know who's turning 100 years old in November, so like 2 months from now. And he met, I think, his great-grandfather, who was around when Napoleon was around. So that is like 200 years worth of history that this guy probably knows. So yeah, I should definitely, talk to him more often. That's pretty interesting.
Because of the Patriot Party in the Netherlands, the French finally invaded the kingdom in 1795.
The French.
Leading to the British in the same year invading the Cape Colony, essentially keeping it out of French hands at the time. However, in 1803, they gave it back to the Dutch, and they became the rulers of it once again. But in 1805, when the Dutch once again, unfortunately, were allied to the French, the British came back and took it for the last time, which was finalised in 1814.
Should have never allied with the French. Nothing good's come from the French.
Now at this stage, obviously, the Boers, this Dutch-speaking mix of essentially largely Dutch Protestant people from the Netherlands, also you have some from France.
Dutch, braaiing en stroopwafels are banned? What? Ik denk niet zo, Nikaki.
And some people from further afield, like in Asia, and some African groups essentially formed this large conglomeration which became known as the Boers. And relations between the British and the Boers wasn't very good either. They banned things like speaking Dutch, and this led to the first of the Great Treks, which started to happen around the time when the British came into power. It had even started to happen under some of the Dutch authorities, but the really big one, the Great Trek, started to occur in the 1830s. But of course, now you may be wondering, what about the Africans? This is a video about South Africa, so what's going on with our Bantu friends? Well, around the same time in the early 19th century, in 1818 is the year often given, the various Nguni tribes were unified by a man named
If I'm not mistaken, Nguni actually means cow.
And this is of course the famous Shaka Zulu. And he reformed the army, and essentially with this reformation of the army he was able to mobilize far more men, which he used to unleash a reign of terror on the various Bantu peoples in the northeast of Africa. And of course...
Ayo, Gooning? No, Nguni. Not... It's a Nguni, not... gooning.
Of course, when these people, the Zulus, would move another tribe out of the way because they were so warlike, that other tribe would then displace other tribes, essentially like what happened in the Volkswanderung in Europe after the Romans, with the Huns then going in, and then they displaced the Alans, and the Alans would go in and they would annoy the Saxons, and then the Saxons would go and invade another area. The same thing happened with these Bantu peoples, and it's
Okay, let's see, we got the matabella, which is also the name of a breakfast down here, funny enough. The hlubi, the ngwane, the mfengu, and of course the tosa, and of course the Zulu causing all of our problems.
thought that up to 2 million people lost their lives in what became known in Zulu as the Difikane, or in other languages in the region as the Mufakane, which essentially meant the crushing or the great displacement, something along those lines in this area.
And then their campaigning came to a grinding halt when they came versus European firepower.
Many of these tribes were moved and displaced, and lots of people being killed, moving new linguistic groups into certain areas like the Ndebele.
Yeah, I think looking at this map, I think the Khois were like around here with the Northern Cape, Northwestern Cape.
Speaking Matabele people who moved into what's now the area of sort of Zimbabwe, the Limpopo Delta, and then other groups also moving south and westwards. And essentially the great thing that came out of this was that the Zulus became the dominant tribe in South Africa, especially in that region. Of course, you had a few tribes who held out, and that's why we have certain countries in South Africa, like Lesotho, for example.
It's Lesotho, but yes.
That's one of the areas that held out against the Zulus, but most of them were unable to. And this great killing off of these African tribes was one of the reasons that the Great Trek could go ahead, because of course they had sent scouts out earlier and they found that large tracts of land that had been inhabited by these tribes were completely abandoned because so many people had been killed or displaced. And also the Zulus found themselves with a huge portion of land that was now theirs. So actually some of the Zulu kings tried to communicate with the Boers, and some of the Boers were under the impression that they could buy land if they fulfilled certain tasks for the Zulu king called Dingane. But we're not entirely sure what happened. But essentially, Peter Retief, which was one of these Boer leaders, was killed by Dingane and all of his men in a massacre.
Yeah, betrayal.
Okay. And then you get this long period of war between the Boers, or the Voortrekkers, as it's sometimes called, and the various African nations, mostly though the Zulus, who were their main enemy in various engagements.
I actually wonder what would have happened if the Europeans, like especially the Dutch and the British, never arrived in South Africa. What would have happened to the other non-Zulu tribes? It probably would have been genocided. Because I doubt the Zulu expansion would have stopped, by the KwaZulu-Natal. They probably would have gone all the way down east and south to the Cape, if they could.
Like at Italeni, or the very famous engagement of Bloedrivier, the Blood River.
Ah yes, everybody loves the Blood River.
Where about 10,000 Zulu warriors were attempting to attack a few hundred Boers, but they were able to keep them off in their lager formation. Again, I've got a video about the Great Trek if you're interested in this. And
good video, by the way.
The Boers then essentially moved more inland away from the Zulus and founded two Boer republics, one called the Oranje Vrystaat, the Orange Free State, the other being called the Suid-Afrikaanse Republiek, which in English is often called Transvaal because it was north of the Vaal River. And these peoples are still represented on they were represented on the old South African flag, with their two flags in the middle of the old Dutch Prinsenvlag, which is a bit of fun trivia there. But then, after diamonds were discovered in Oranje Vrystaat in the 1870s, and then later on gold was discovered in the Transvaal, this made the British seem suddenly a little more...
I say, diamonds, old chap. Would you mind perhaps sharing a bit? And then they brought all their armadas.
Interested in the region. And they then wanted to form a sort of federation in South Africa like they had done in Canada. And this obviously meant dealing with the independent Boer kingdoms, which they would do.
Lovely weather we're having today, fellows. Nia, which means no.
Or republics, rather, sorry, which they would do in the various Boer wars, but also potentially dealing with the Zulus. Now, of course, at this stage, the Boers wanted absolutely nothing to do with the British whatsoever. But then they tried to get in with the Zulus by listing a lot of demands in an ultimatum that they knew the Zulus could never accept. So things like introducing the British military system over the Zulu one.
Okay, let's see. Disband the Zulu army, adoption of British military system, acceptance of missionaries, British Asians to live in Zululand, no banishings from Zululand, compulsory cricket at 12, to be followed by tea at 3 o'clock, chaps to be added to the Zulu dictionary, scones to be made a national dish, toothbrushes to be made illegal. What? Oh yeah, British dental. Now it makes sense.
And accepting missionaries, that kind of thing. And the British, with this, knew that the Zulus wouldn't accept, thus funneling the tension that would lead to the Zulu War. Alright everyone, so thank you very much for watching. This has been a bit of a blitzkrieg of the...
A bit of a blitzkrieg, you say? Who's my kind of historian?
Lead up to the Zulu War, but it's a very interesting period, and I've actually got another video about South Africa being linked more to the modern politics, because if you aren't aware, there's a lot of things been going on in South Africa with a lot of various politicians claiming one thing about history and another.
That is
and
true.
I thought
That
I'd
is
maybe
true.
share a few of my own opinions and why I'm thinking it's a pretty silly situation at the moment. But of course, this is a collaboration with Armchair Historian. Definitely go and check him out. He has awesome videos, really cool animations. Like it's honestly, it is like watching a trailer, like a CGI trailer. It's really good. So definitely go and check him out. He's got a video up right now as well about the Zulu War. So that's essentially part 2 to
We'll
this
get to
one.
that.
So after you've,
We'll get that later, boys.
given me a like and a comment and whatever, then go over and check him out as
Alright,
well.
drop him a
So
nice
thank
like.
you very much for watching. I've been History with Hilbert in collaboration with Armchair Historian, and I hope I will see you all very soon to do some braaiing. Bliksem.
It's boring, but yeah, awesome. That was absolutely fantastic video. I love how much research he's put into this and just how hard he tries to pronounce everything correctly. He does it a lot better than most other people, so definite props to this guy. Big clappies. Okay, what's the next one?